do you see any chances of extending beyond September 22 so that government can complete all those steps?
Yeah, in principle, I mean, as it described in the report, the durations and the size of the programs continue to be the same right now, and so the recalibrations, what this means, and this is how it has been done for these past reviews, is to work out around the composition, around the speed, to adjust the implementation of the policy outcomes to the situation in the economy. So as you can see, the idea is that this there is a little bit of background noise, sorry. So the economy is improving. Now we are projecting that we will grow on a positive rate, 1.5%. If policies continue being implemented, Pakistan could go back to growth and potential. So in these circumstances, under these policies, there is still room and space to continue with the reform program.
So you also mentioned personal income tax reforms. Can you explain a little bit what are the type of reforms that FBR needs to bring in this personal income tax for the individuals?
Yeah, I think that this is a very succinct description in the report. I mean, in some of the paragraphs, but the personal income tax in Pakistan collect very little, unfortunately, no. And with the corporate income tax, there should be a much more stronger instrument to collect revenues, no. And we know that because of these weaknesses in these two instruments, then there is this withholding taxes that also are very distortionary. So the idea would be to strengthen both the corporate income tax and the personal income tax, and to move to a much more modern type of taxation. So the personal income tax, first of all, required more progressivity. It has no progressivity, so there will be a change, I think, in the slabs. I think it's what is described in the report, broader in the base, because there are a lot of also no exemptions that maybe they are not in line with best practices. No, this is something to discuss, and therefore to define the tax in a way that makes sure that the number of people that are paying the tax, I think now is around 2 million people in a country of 220 million people. This is not function. It's not working. So it needs to be a different type of personal income tax in line with best international practices. But that should be for the. I mean, this is for the now in the agenda, no. No. So the focus was on corporate income tax. That, as I explained, personal income tax is now in the technical work for the future. I mean,
So, what is it that you are forcing vis-a-vis debt sustainability of Pakistan? So, your opinion from report.
Yeah, I mean, let's start with the debt sustainability. The report includes an annex at the end that I recommend everybody to read. I pick a few ideas from there and some of the charts. They are annexed on debt sustainability because debt sustainability is the major mandate of the IMF. We have to do the debt sustainability analysis of any country in the world. No, you know that. No, it's one of our bread and butter of the IMF. No, and then I think the annex is very clear. No, I mean the debt situation in Pakistan is complicated. I mean the level of is high, but with the right policies and the policies that are being implemented and described in the staff report, the debt remains on sustainable level with several risks that are also described. No, so the important thing is the credibility of the strategy and the consistency on policies. No, so this is very important to assess the sustainability of any country. No, in the world. Plus, the other thing that is important is debt management. I think the report also have important section on debt management. I think the government of Pakistan has made a lot of progress on improving debt management. What I mean, improving debt management, meaning the calendar of issuances, lengthening the maturity of the debt management, having a more active presence in the markets. I think they're having a huge progress. The idea is to continue with this type of strategy, because this is how countries, different treasuries, in the world, they manage the debt profile with an active debt management in a modern way. And I think Pakistan is doing well, and then they will continue doing extra reforms about that.
Policies and procedure reform vis-a-vis FATF. Those have been appreciated, but we know that there's still 2 action points on which Pakistan has to work. So any take on that, if you like to share with us, Pakistan vis-a-vis FATF?
Well, I think that the progress so far and the plan for the future is very clearly described in these reports for the review. So, I mean, Pakistan has done a huge progress on addressing the issues that were identified by FATF. COVID implies some kind of delay, unfortunately, but there was a huge understanding about that, because remember that the FATF is not only about legislation, it's about implementation as well. And then if offices and police enforcement courts are not operating as usual because of COVID, then the effectiveness could be affected, I guess. So, but beyond that delay, I mean, now there has been a huge catching up, and that was reflected in the February assessment that happened recently. And I think that there is still some items that are missing, but the plan is to address them. Pakistan have a strong team. They are coordinating and they are working very well, and they are delivering. So I think that everything is in place for Pakistan to succeed on that area.
Yusuf, looking at the previous IMF programs, engagements in Pakistan, one found out that, for example, the last program very successfully concluded, and then there was an election year, and the government went on a spending spree, losing out all the benefits that the last engagement with IMF has provided to Pakistan's economy. Now, will it not be more sustainable if we can get this program extended so that current government, they can't go on a spending spree in the run-up to election? Otherwise, one of the fear or one of the apprehension is that by September 2022, all the fiscal consolidation and all the measures would be taken, and then there would be again an election year. And the chances that the benefit of this program, they again go haywire.
No, this is a very good question, and I'm very happy that you asked the question, because this program is aimed at introducing the institutions, the institutional changes that could help Pakistan. I'm sure they will help Pakistan to manage the policy making and in general and the management of the economy in a way that is insulated as much as possible for this type of political development. This is what many countries in the world has been doing, and Pakistan is just in the catching up with that type of best practices. What are these best practices? Well, having a regulatory institution like NEPRA and the State Bank of Pakistan with the rule of the games that are based on objectives that are good for the country and not necessarily for political consideration. The same with the improvement in the public financial management law that also introduced discipline in the budget process, something that was very needed in Pakistan, and this law was missing. So it's going to also to instill discipline, because now there is a need to do a medium-term strategy paper for the budget.
losses due to COVID and the challenges due to COVID, they are much less than our peer economies. But comparing it with the first wave of COVID, especially the losses of precious lives. So in the during last 1 month, during last 30 days, the average number of deaths comes to around 98, 99 lives per day. So do we see any other opportunity of this rapid finance instrument as we had in the first wave, so that if government have to go for some sort of lockdown and they have to provide again the direct cash transfer to the selected household as they did in the 15 million household in the first wave, 12,000 rupees. So is there any cushion for RFI again for this COVID-related expense?
Okay, so this is a very good question. The third wave is something that we see with a lot of preoccupation in Pakistan and in other countries. I think the government are monitoring it very carefully, and depending on how things evolve, policies will need to be adjusted to the reality. That's for sure. That's why, as I explained in the presentation, on the fiscal as regards the budget, if there is any need to increase spending, either on social support, for instance, extra cash transfer for the most vulnerable, or there is a need to incur a higher level of spending, COVID-related, I don't know, health spending or any other type of support, it will be accommodated in the fiscal strategy, the package that the authorities put together for these reviews, envisage that as an adjuster. No, so that will not be a straitjacket to make sure this spending that is necessary is done. This is not going to be a problem.
National Socioeconomic Registry update. We know due to COVID, we couldn't update it last June, and now again, with the COVID cases increasing, if we couldn't do it by 30th of June, how would IMF look into it, and whether there would be some extra condition for this targeted subsidies or providing benefits if this NSCR registry is not updated by 30th of June?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. This is a very specific question that we will need to look at that also in coordination with other agencies that has more expertise on these matters. No, that our colleague for the World Bank or other agencies that are helping Pakistan. The idea is that the goal is to support people in needs. Is there is a need for that because of the third wave? You know, I mean, if the database is completed, that will be much better. You can identify these people in a better way. If it is not completed, I don't know. I suppose that the experts that are advising the team of the SAS program, they will manage to get this program in place. I mean, there is no compromise on helping people, on saving lives. So no, that's for sure. No, but in any case, my understanding is that they are making very important progress on updating the database, even despite of COVID. It's admirable the work that Dr. Sania is doing at the SAS program.
You must have seen numerous reports which have somehow turned State Bank of Pakistan's autonomy controversial, NEPRA and Dogra autonomy controversial. The bottom line of many of those reports is that under the IMF dictation, government is actually letting go of its sovereignty. State Bank would be now much higher than the state itself, and the same in cases of NEPRA and Dogra. I know the parliament is, of course, empowered, and what sort of legislation comes in the parliament, IMF doesn't have any control on it. But what is your view on these news reports? Yeah,
I mean, this is a little bit connected to the first question about how to ensure Pakistan has a good policy making and good rule of in the decisions of on the management of the economy is a little bit related to that. No, in the sense that with this type of reforms that, by the way, are not new. I think the fund and other international partners of Pakistan has been proposing this reform in the past, so they are a little bit overdue. What Pakistan is doing is catching up with the best international practices in conducting key policies. No, for instance, NEPRA Act is a regulator. They have to establish tariff according to certain formulas and with certain automaticity. This is a standard in other countries. And then if there is a need to support the most vulnerable, because the tariff is reflecting the costs that are happening for reasons that are beyond the authority controls, there are ways of helping the most vulnerable. There are ways of helping those people in need, but not by maybe jeopardizing the financial stability of the whole system and the financial situation of the distribution companies, because at the end of the day, that is a burden on everybody.
And I assume that IMF has nothing to do with this draft legislation that is being prepared by legislators independently. So IMF is not providing them any sort of dictation, which is reported in the media.
Yeah, no, I mean, we are not dictating anything to anybody. I don't know what it is, but I think it's a very type of journalistic language that's used to create sensationalism. I mean, we are providing technical assistance to countries in the world, to the country members. We provide all the time technical assistance on many things as upon request. No, so if countries approach us asking about, can you help me to understand how other countries are doing that? I would like to improve my systems. Can you help us? We have a big team of experts that are helping countries and Pakistan on tax reform, tax administration, public financial management, central banking, you name it. No? So in that sense, yeah, we are playing our advisory role as because this is our responsibility. But upon request of the authorities, we always do that.
How difficult can it get when there are frequent transitions and faces change? Because we do understand that in this case, commitment of the government matters, but the commitment of individuals and their understanding of reform also matters. So this question is with regards to these recent transitions which have taken place in the government, and how, in what manner does Teresa see these impacting the implementation of some of the structural indicators mentioned in the report?
Okay, yeah, no, very good. Thank you very much. Let's see. The first question I think is very easy to respond. I mean, there are always. There could be a change in individuals, in governments, also sometimes in our own team. We always work with the government of Pakistan, and we always work to help the people in Pakistan. So the game continue. The players are different, but that's not affecting our role. It's not affecting our commitment. Not affecting our work. On the top of that, I had to say that the engagement with the Pakistani authorities in general, our counterparts in a broad sense, from Power Division to SBP to Ministry of Finance to FBI, you name it. The engagement is very strong at all levels. No, maybe it's not visible because we have a lot of meetings and exchange, even now with the virtual platform. So the engagement is very strong. So that means that always there has been relatively easy to kind of hand over on issues and everything. So we are working on, and then we are like a business as usual. No? So that in that sense, I don't see any type of concerns or anything. No.
The second question is with regards to whether the government was a bit unrealistic in accepting prematurely a rollback of tax exemptions and several forms of subsidies just when it was entering into the third wave. Had the government not predicted the pressures of the third wave correctly, or was there was there something which took them aback? But do you feel that that this argument is true, that government should have probably come up with a better argument and not accepted to a rollback in those tax exemptions or some forms of subsidies, which you also showed in your slides, which are just critical at this point to kickstart the growth, not even revive it?
I mean, this is a very good question, because that was part of the recalibration, and I think it's important to explain that. I mean, the tax policy reform, the transformation of the tax system that Pakistan will need to conduct is very comprehensive, and has to be very deep, and as described in the country documents of the design of the program. You go to the original program document. There's an ambitious tax policy reform there, very well described. And by this time of the program, we could have been a little bit more advanced in that tax reform, but because of the COVID, there was a need of a recalibration. And how the recalibration has been? The recalibration has been on a focus on corporate income tax. The corporate income tax was part of the work that was done through this for the second and the fifth review. Why? Because you look at the corporate income tax is full of loopholes and tax exemptions, and depreciation rules are very generous. I mean, not in line with the design of good corporate income tax in other countries, and these are no taxes that are related to the most vulnerable segment of the.
So that's the second question. And the last question for now is with regards to the limits of accommodative monetary policy. And in your opinion, if you see that as there are some global uncertainties around commodity prices changing quickly, inflation picking up maybe, could there be any specific limits to the current accommodative monetary policy which the central bank is following?
What is important to emphasize is that the State Bank of Pakistan, as other modern central banks in the world, in emerging markets, they have a monetary policy system in place that is based on data, based on also on a kind of the deliberations by the Monetary Policy Committee. So it's up to them. These are the rules that need to follow in order to determine how will be the tone of the monetary policy looking forward. So, and then what is very important is the clarity about the rules and the mechanism, the institutional mechanism. This is, I think, is very, very important. So we need to continue monitoring what is going to happen.